Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. You're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. At what stage will the UK's vaccine rollout enable a return to something like normal? A senior Public Health England official has warned Sky News some restrictions may need to be in place until all adults have received a vaccination. And with questions over how long lockdown will last, how is the economy faring and how long will it take to recover? Also this morning, Pip rules the waves after 95 days at sea. British sailor Pip Hare becomes only the 8th woman to complete the solo Vendee Globe race. She joins us later on. Back to Beethoven, the conductor looking to the past to compare his own life with that of the great composer. It's Friday, the 12th of February. A senior Public Health England official tells Sky News coronavirus restrictions could be required until all adults have been vaccinated. The hidden cost of COVID. Sky News reports on a surge in mental health referrals during the pandemic. As Wales hits its vaccine target, attention turns to the whole UK and plans for the next phase of the rollout. And senior Democrats rest their case against Donald Trump, warning more violence like the Capitol riots could follow if he's not convicted.
What is impeachable conduct, if not this? I challenge you all to think about it. If you think this is not impeachable, what is?
And it becomes milder into the new week, but until then, it's still looking generally cold with the risk of further snow. I'll have further details for you later in the programme.
Well, breaking news now, and in the last few moments, the Office for National Statistics has published GDP figures for the fourth quarter of last year. Well, let's speak now to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. What can you tell us, Ed?
Well, Gillian, these numbers have literally just come out, so at the moment I just have the overall figure, which is a 1% growth in the final quarter of last year. Now, that's actually a little bit better than expected. Bear in mind that a lot of people thought because of that second lockdown in much of the country during that period that you might have seen a contraction, which would in turn potentially lead to a double-dip recession. Well, that hasn't happened. It's 1% growth. And when you look at the total year as a whole, I think that we're talking about around 9.9, so around 10% of a fall in GDP last year. I'm going to have to kind of go back into the spreadsheets and work out when the last time that was as bad. I think that might be a little bit less bad than we saw in the 1920s. I mean, a lot of people at the time were talking about how this was going to be the worst recession since the 18th century, the early period of the 18th century, in terms of the total fall over 2020. Well, now we have those preliminary numbers. It may not be quite as bad as that, but as I say, the figures have just dropped, so we're going to have a look at them over the course of the next hour or so. We'll also be talking to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, about his reaction to those numbers and indeed to the state of the economy now. Because in a way, I think the issue with this is what we're doing right now, and obviously he's in the process of preparing for a budget. What we're doing right now is looking at numbers that are quite historic. They're numbers that cover the final 3 months of last year. And during that period, obviously, there was this lockdown in much of the country, but it wasn't as severe as the lockdown that we're facing around most of the UK at the moment. And so the expectation is the quarter we're in at the moment, so the period we're in right now, I suppose the question is whether he's going to do anything more like that. Are there going to be stimulus measures like Eat Out to help out? They're going to get the economy going again. Perhaps you'd have thought he wouldn't do that again. But as I was saying, this quarter we're in right now, this period we're in at the moment, almost every economist thinks that we're going to see a contraction. And some people have talked about double-dip recessions, and there is this it's pretty arbitrary idea that a recession is only when you have 2 successive quarters of contraction. Well, because last quarter, the one we're talking about now, because there was growth then, you're not going to have a technical recession. But for most people, when they look at the numbers, what they will conclude is we're in a period right now of potential contraction. That's not good news. We'll have more from the Chancellor on that later on, and more analysis giving you a sense of just how bad last year was really in historical perspective.
OK, Ed, we'll leave you to drill down into those figures for the moment. Thank you. Well, I'm joined now by the Home Office Minister, Victoria Atkins. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, can we get your reaction to those figures that we've just had there?
Well, look, we knew that the pandemic was going to have an impact on the economy, and that's why the measures that we took last year to protect jobs and to safeguard businesses have been so important. If those measures hadn't have happened, then I suspect we'd be looking at far worse figures today. So, we will come out of this pandemic and the economy will recover. We've just got to keep sticking with this lockdown, and we've got to stick with the plan that the Chancellor has for us moving out of this period.
And in the light of that, what can we expect with the budget? Are we likely to see tax increases?
Well, you'll appreciate I can't possibly say. I mean, we have the budget on the 8th of March set, and the Chancellor and the Treasury team will be working very, very hard, and of course, taking into account these figures. But the package of support that we've rolled out over the last year comes to some £280 billion. It has helped protect some 12 million jobs and many millions of businesses. So we want to be there to help businesses survive this very difficult period, so that when we're through the pandemic, we can continue with our agenda on levelling up for the entire country.
Are you at least able to say whether the furlough scheme might be extended? That's something people are very, very keen to know as soon as possible.
As both the Prime Minister and others have indicated, we have to wait until the budget. I don't want to take anything away from the Chancellor and his announcements in March, but what we do know is just how important the furlough scheme and other schemes have been over the past year. And as I say, the plans that the Chancellor have set down to protect jobs and to help businesses really have made an impact. And although today the news is as it is, we're very confident that the package of support has helped the economy.
OK, let's move on to something that everybody's talking about at the minute, their summer holiday, or the lack of. Have you booked yours?
I completely sympathise, particularly on this very, very cold February day as I look out of my window. Look, we just can't say at the moment. We have a very clear plan as to...
Have you booked your summer holiday, though? That was the question.
I haven't. Goodness me, I haven't had time, and obviously I've been following very carefully the guidance. But the Prime Minister has said next week is a critical week. We're going to gather all of the data and review that data, both international data as to the impact of the vaccine, but also our own data. And then on the 22nd of February, the Prime Minister will make a statement to the House of Commons where he'll set out our roadmap to ease lockdown. And so I can't say anything further to that. But look, I totally get it. We're all looking to the summer and hoping that things will be better.
Do you think that you should just be telling people that they can book holidays but at their own risk, allowing them some discretion, really, rather than being dictated to by government?
Well, I think we're at this period, as I say, just before the review next week and the Prime Minister setting out the roadmap. I totally understand people's wish to start thinking about sunnier climes or thinking about their holidays within the UK. But just at this point in time, we've just got to keep tight and continue all that we're trying to do to bring the pandemic under control. So all of the measures that apply in lockdown. But
how long do you think the restrictions will last or should last?
Well, again, we have to be led by the data on this. Look, we've got some fantastic news on the vaccination programme. We are on track to meet our target of next Monday of vaccinating, giving the first dose to the four most vulnerable priority groups as defined by the scientists. That is great news, and it really is an achievement to have got that far. And then, of course, the vaccine will be being rolled out in accordance with the advice of the Joint Committee. But until then, we've got to take this step by step, and we're all very, very keen, I know we are, to see this roadmap out of...
Yeah, and as you say, that's very positive news with the vaccines being rolled out so successfully. Doesn't then that point to actually moving out of lockdown because we have so successfully vaccinated so many people?
Well, look, of course we want to move out of lockdown, but we've got to do it at a safe pace. We've got to ensure that we don't put at risk all of the hard work that we've put into place over January and previous months. And that's why we're conducting this review next week after we have completed the first 4 priority groups with vaccination, and then the Prime Minister will set out the roadmap. And look, we want to, for example, look at schools. At the 8th of March will be a date I suspect parents across the country will be watching with bated breath. That is the date that we have said, look, if the data allows it, then we're going to start unlocking schools. And so from that, many things will flow. But we must just wait until the 22nd of February when the Prime Minister can announce the results of the review, and we can have a really good idea as to what the roadmap looks like.
SAGE member Sir Jeremy Farrar says transmission is still incredibly high and it doesn't make any sense to set out a roadmap in February for arbitrary dates in March or April.
Well, we know that the R rate is going in the right direction. It's going downwards, and of course we keep this under review. It's why we're looking at the data next week, where we'll have a body of evidence both in the UK but across the world as to the success of the vaccination programmes and what they do to the transmission rates. I'm going to go and visit my local vaccination.
It doesn't make any sense. Sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time. He's saying that it doesn't make any sense at this point to be setting out a roadmap. I mean, that's quite an opinion that we should be taking into account, isn't it?
Of course we take the advice of the scientists very seriously. We also, though, whilst the scientists, the medics are looking completely understandably, they're concentrating on the clinical and the medical repercussions of this pandemic. The Prime Minister has this very difficult balancing act of keeping the public with us, keeping us all united in wanting to stick to the rules, to hands, face, space, and so on, and the lockdown, but also has to keep an eye on the economy. So I think it's right actually that we should set out a roadmap. I think people need to have some idea as to when what they can expect over the coming months. And of course, part of that, as you started this interview with, part of that is looking at the impact on the economy, but also critical services such as schools. We have to give the public some idea of where we're going with this, and that's exactly what the Prime Minister is going to do on the 27th.
And as you mentioned, schools critically need to know, they need notice as to when to reopen. Is this roadmap going to be set out on the 22nd of February or the week beginning the 22nd of February? There's been some confusion.
Yeah, we're expecting to make the statement on Monday, the 22nd of February.
So schools will have the necessary notice that they need about reopening?
So I've been very careful, as has been the case throughout. We have said that that decision will be based on the data, and so this is why next week is so important, because that's the review of the data. But we would like to be able to start announcing schools being unlocked on the 8th of March, but it is absolutely subject to the data. I'm so sorry. We're in this period at the moment where we're just having to look at the data. I can't give you the sort of answers that you're completely understandably asking for, but we've just got to take this step by step. When I speak to people, asking constituents and so on how they're feeling, I think most people understand that we have got to see out this lockdown. People want us to, for this to be the final lockdown, as the Prime Minister has said again and again. So we've just got to take this step by step and follow the data.
Can you tell us about the Cabinet Office proposal to introduce vaccines, passports and testing certificates, the meeting that's happening today?
Well, at this precise point in time, we have no plans to introduce vaccine passports. The Transport Secretary has talked about the possibility of an international system, but we're a long way from that at the moment, and so at the moment we have no plans for that.
Grant Shapps has said talks are underway to this effect.
Well, he is the Transport Secretary, but as I say, I can't speculate further at this moment in time on that.
The Public Accounts Committee, they're warning that supply problems could threaten reaching the targets. Are there issues with supplies of the vaccine?
We've been very clear that it's, there will be lumpy, if you like, periods in the vaccine supply, but we're absolutely confident that on Monday we will have met our target of vaccinating the highest priority, the 4 highest priority groups. And so, we've always said that supply is a factor in rolling out the vaccination, but that deadline of Monday is there and we will meet it.
The committee, though, have also said that they're concerned about the lack of planning after the next stage of people to be vaccinated.
Well, the NHS have been working on this for months. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we were able to roll the vaccine programme out as smoothly and as quickly as we have done. And of course, we have our task force of tens of thousands of volunteers, as well as doctors, nurses, pharmacists, people across the country helping deliver these vaccines. So as time goes on, inevitably the supply system is becoming smoother and smoother. So I note those concerns, but I have to say the fact we're going to be able to meet our target on Monday, I think speaks volumes about the success of the NHS of pulling together this huge logistical exercise and delivering so many vaccines to people. Do you know, on Saturday, we were delivering on average 1,000 jabs a minute. And that's an extraordinary figure and shows just how hard everybody in the NHS and in the pharmacies and all of the centres are working to help members of the public get their vaccination in good time.
Indeed. Just time for one quick question on police forces in England and Wales getting this extra £60 million in funding to help with the enforcement of coronavirus rules. What exactly will that be going on?
£58 million is going to the 43 police forces to help them with the extra costs that they are having to cover through the pandemic. And so it will help all sorts of things, including ensuring that fleet cars and stations are COVID secure. And the remaining £2 million will be specifically for police forces who will be helping in the efforts to police the borders in airports and ports, following our very stringent measures that will be happening, that are happening now, but will be further strengthened as of next week.
Minister, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Thank you. OK, well, let's get some reaction now to that interview from our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Good morning to you. What did you make of what the Minister had to say?
Yeah, morning, Gillian. I thought Victoria Atkins stuck to the script pretty tightly, not wanting to give anything away on whether that school's deadline on the 8th of March will be met, about international travel as well. I thought the one thing she said, though, that was quite interesting and could sort of plot a path forward or give us an indication of where we're going forward, was when she spoke about how they take the scientific advice seriously, but Boris Johnson also needs to make sure he keeps the public on side and needs to keep an eye on the economy as well. So suggesting that they can't go necessarily for the most stringent restrictions, as some scientists might like, because they need to make sure that the public will still stick with them. Now, I think that matters because we know that the scientific backdrop to these big decisions that are coming in the next couple of weeks is essentially that there will need to be restrictions as long as not everyone in the country is vaccinated, and potentially even longer. What Victoria Atkins suggested was that the government wouldn't necessarily be sticking to that scientific advice to the letter, and that they would have one eye on adherence, on whether the public can stomach any more rules, and one eye on the economy as well.
OK, Rob, for the moment, thank you very much. Let's take you back to our lead story, those GDP figures, and we've got some reaction from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. He says, today's figures show that the economy has experienced a serious shock as a result of the pandemic, which has been felt by countries around the world. While there are some positive signs of the economy's resilience over the winter, we know that the current lockdown continues to have a significant impact on many people and businesses. That's why my focus remains fixed on doing everything we can to protect jobs, businesses and livelihoods. At the budget, I will set out the next stage of our plan for jobs and the support we'll provide through the next phase of the pandemic. So that the very latest there from the Chancellor, and we will be speaking to him later on. Ed Conway shall be. Still to come on the show. As Wales announces it's met the target to offer a vaccine to everyone in the top 4 priority groups, the Welsh Health Minister, Vaughan Gething, joins us at 7:30. At 7:25, we'll be speaking to the co-author of a new modelling study into the UK's vaccine rollout, which suggests the vaccine is already bringing down COVID-19 deaths. At 8:05, I'll be getting reaction to the latest GDP figures from Labour's Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden. Now, mental health services in the NHS are under increasing strain as the pandemic and ongoing lockdown continue to put individuals under huge strain. In one mental health trust covering South East London and parts of Kent, psychological therapy referrals have swollen by 280% since the start of the pandemic. Doctors have also issued warnings about the number of children who have overdosed or self-harmed. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, was given access to one trust and has this report.
How long have you stopped your medication? 2 days, that's not too bad.
The calls keep coming. This mental health crisis line is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It needs to be.
And for you to look into what makes you feel better and what makes you feel happy.
We are seeing more people contacting services who have no past experience with mental health care. People's stresses are up, people's resources are down. So the things you might do to help with that ordinarily, maybe you go for dinner with friends, you can't do that. And then the services, when you go to contact them, are really busy. So we're stretched.
The number of calls to their crisis lines are 30% above pre-pandemic levels.
I do think we're going to have a surge in the coming months. I think what's really hard to see is how long that's going to last and how deeply it's going to last.
We've been given rare access to the wards of a mental health unit and the teams of dedicated staff who have worked through this emergency.
We always run close to full capacity, and that's something that is been the case before the pandemic. That's not been altered. In fact, at the start of the pandemic, we had a push to try discharge as many people as we could out of an anxiety that this would be an infection hub for them.
At Oxley's, they've seen demand for access to psychological therapies up by 280% compared to pre-pandemic levels. It reflects what is happening across the country. Peter, and this is not his real name, is a schoolboy from London. He tells me he's had some issues with his mental health in the past, but the pandemic is making his obsessive-compulsive disorder worse.
If you have a compulsion that just simply involves door handles, but the pandemic, the issue with the pandemic is that it kind of gives you more time to think things through. And because of that, you start to maybe think, maybe there's something wrong with light switches as well. And then all of a sudden, it's like you've got little things popping up here and there. And then if you're not able to stop them in their tracks early on, they can develop further.
And does that lead to you being overwhelmed with these thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Omar Mughrabi is Peter's consultant. He told me he's seeing a sharp spike in cases, and some were very worrying.
I've seen a couple of young people who've presented to A&E who have taken overdoses, who've cut themselves severely, some who've changed their patterns of eating so severely that they've lost a lot of weight that our colleagues, medical colleagues, are treating them medically in order to save their lives.
What's driving this?
One can only say the major factor across all of it is the pandemic.
It's not just the young who are affected. The elderly are particularly vulnerable too, with some clinicians warning of a trauma time bomb.
It's the same as everything else. The longer you leave it and the worse it's likely to get. Now that's true of cancer, but it's equally true of mental health.
This is exactly what Dr. Fadipe is seeing in her ward. She specialises in the care of elderly patients with dementia. Even inside here, the effect of the pandemic can be felt.
During the first wave, I think families were a bit worried. They're presenting themselves now. We've seen an increased referrals, and we've seen that people are much worse.
How worried are you about the long-term impact?
Isolation leading to low mood and depression can be a precipitator for developing dementia. A lack of activities, which we've all seen in lockdown, can lead to or can precipitate dementia. So I am worried that we will see repercussions of this for years to come.
Successive lockdowns are taking their mental toll on all of us. But some people will get support from family and friends once restrictions are lifted. The real worry is for the people who might not be so resilient. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, South East London.
And you can see a longer version of that special report throughout the day here on Sky News. Let's take a look at the latest coronavirus figures for the UK now. And there have been 13,494 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. A further 678 people have died within 28 days of testing positive. It brings the UK total to 115,529. And so far, more than 13.5 million first doses of a vaccine have been administered. And a reminder that all the information that's underpinned our special programmes on learning the lessons of COVID this week is now available for you to read. Sky News has compiled a detailed analysis of every significant moment during the pandemic, a comprehensive timeline of a year like no other. And we've published it in full on our website for anyone and everyone to access and explore. Prosecutors in Donald Trump's second impeachment trial have concluded their arguments, claiming Donald Trump incited the Capitol riots on the 6th of January. House prosecutors argued that American democracy would be tarnished for years to come if the Senate didn't convict the former president and bar him from taking office again in the future. Over 2 days, they presented statements and videos showing the extent of the violence.
What is impeachable conduct, if not this? I challenge you all to think about it. If you think this is not impeachable, what is? What would be? If President Trump's lawyers endorse his breathtaking assertion that his conduct in inciting these events was totally appropriate, and the Senate acquits Donald Trump, then any president could incite and provoke insurrectionary violence against us again.
Time for a look at the weather now with Naz. And it reminds me of when my eldest daughter was a little toddler. It's freezing.
Technically below freezing for many areas this morning. Not as cold as it was yesterday morning, but we have seen temperatures drop into minus double figures in some spots of Scotland once again.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Into the new week, and we'll start to see milder conditions that eventually spread in from the west. But until then, it's cold over the next few days. In fact, it is a chilly start again this morning. Not as cold as it was yesterday morning, but still very cold for many spots. Temperatures drop down into minus double figures in some areas of Scotland, and generally below freezing for most places. There is a widespread frost out there. There's also the risk of ice across the north and east, where there are snow showers over northeast Scotland and northeast England, and over parts of the southwest. It's windy with the risk of ice and some rain, sleet and snow across parts of Ireland and the southwest of the UK. But that will tend to ease away and become drier across these areas later. But the west, particularly across Ireland and Northern Ireland and the southwest of the UK, stays rather cloudy with limited amounts of brightness and very windy with coastal gales likely. Further east, we'll see drier and brighter conditions. It will be cold, though, and there will be the continuation of snow showers across the northeast, too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, I'll speak to the Welsh Health Minister, Vaughan Gething. Now, Wales has offered the vaccine to everyone in the top 4 most vulnerable groups.
The nature of warfare is changing. An invisible enemy is on the rise, in a grey zone between war and peace. It's a global battlefield that thrives on deniability. The weapons of choice include disinformation, intimidation, and cyber attacks. Everyone's a target. Into the grey zone from Sky News. Warfare is changing, and now we're all on the front line. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. I'm Michelle Clifford and I'm Sky's Europe correspondent.
You can spread a message of positivity with no characters at all. You can just do it with a smile. But because many of us are unfortunately separated because of the situation, the pandemic, it's more appropriate than ever to share a message of positivity by text. So, you know what? Many of these sentiments were knocking around in some of my existing poetry or things that I say routinely to my friends, in my work, when I'm on the news. And it was just a case of distilling these messages and codifying them with these broad words that we will all relate to: family, work, community, friends, hope, etc. Sometimes I become flippant about it as well. I used to do this with music too, being hard on myself, saying this isn't a real job, what is this? But, you know, there's a real psychological importance to sharing words of meaning and messages of warmth. And I credit Nokia phones for having the foresight to involve me in this.
My family and friends, you give me clarity and sense. I feel you over long distances. I learn so much from our differences. I worry about becoming a stranger. I hate knowing that you could run into danger. I think about the little ones coming of age. I think about the grown-ups succumbing to change.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
Welcome back. Breaking news in the last half an hour, and it's bad reading for the UK economy. Although the economy grew by 1% in the final quarter of 2020, in total it fell 9.9% for the year, the largest annual slump since 1709. Earlier, the Home Office Minister Victoria Atkins gave her reaction to those figures from the Office for National Statistics.
Well, look, we knew that the pandemic was going to have an impact on the economy, and that's why the measures that we took last year to protect jobs and to safeguard businesses have been so important. If those measures hadn't have happened, then I suspect we'd be looking at far worse figures today. So, you know, we will come out of this pandemic and the economy will recover. We've just got to keep sticking with this lockdown, and we've got to stick with the plan that the Chancellor has for us moving out of this period.
Well, MPs are warning that a lack of planning could affect the next phase of the coronavirus vaccine rollout. The next stage aims to see 17.7 million people in the UK, aged between 50 and 70, vaccinated by the end of April. But the Commons Public Accounts Committee says they're concerned that there was much to be done to reach this milestone. It comes as Wales announced it's hit its own target to offer the vaccine to everyone in the top 4 priority groups by mid-February. And I'm joined now by the Welsh Health Minister, Vaughan Gething. Good morning to you. Did you expect to meet this target? Are you surprised that you've realised the target that was set?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm tremendously grateful for all the amazing work that our NHS-led programme has delivered here in Wales with partners in local government, volunteers and some military support too. We were always confident, despite a slightly slower start in the first few weeks than other parts of the UK, that we were able to catch up and move very, very quickly. Once we had both the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine available, we could bring essentially general practice and other local healthcare operatives on board with our mass vaccination centres. So it's been a tremendous job of work and a real achievement. It should give everyone, I think, confidence that we will reach them too in the next stage to get to the next 5 priority groups and then the wider adult population through the summer and into the autumn.
What about those that have missed appointments or are refusing actually to take the vaccination? How will that be approached?
Well, we're operating a leave no one behind approach. That means that if you've missed your appointment, then you can still rebook. We know that some people will have been ill and won't be able to have attended. Some people will change their mind. And the offer of the vaccine isn't a once-in-a-lifetime offer. If you're saying no and you change your mind, we hope people will do, because there are some groups that are more hesitant about taking the vaccine, then you can do that and the NHS won't leave you behind. So I think that's really important. For the 92% of people who already had the vaccine in the first 4 groups, that's good news. For those who have yet to have it, that's good news. And if you're in that about 8% to date that have yet to have it in those first 4 groups, don't worry, because the NHS won't forget you, won't leave you behind, and you can still change your mind.
But for those who do refuse, there's nothing you can do, is there?
No, indeed. And, vaccination is not compulsory. It is an offer to help protect people for themselves, their family, their community, and other people they may never get to meet. We know that without significant protection from the wider population, then we will have to live with extraordinary measures long into the future. Vaccination is a key part of allowing us to recover a more normal way of living our lives. And I, for one, will be ready and willing to have my vaccine when my turn comes. And I think that's really important, about the confidence we all have in the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines, as well, of course, as paying tribute to the fantastic work that our NHS has done here in Wales.
Because the vaccination programme has gone so well, will you be looking to relax restrictions to ease lockdown?
Well, we still have a balance of things to consider. Vaccination is part of what we'll think about in terms of the future, but it's also really about the suppression of virus transmission. You'll recall we had extraordinary rates of coronavirus transmission across Wales just before Christmas. Rates across Wales of over 650 and 100,000. They're now not far above 100. Half of our local authorities in Wales have rates of below 100 per 100,000. So significant progress, but still relatively high to allow lots and lots of areas of activity to open. Our schools should be reopening for face-to-face learning from the 22nd of February for our youngest children up to the age of 7. That's a really important step forward, not just for those children and their families, but I think more broadly for all of us to regain some confidence in our ability to start reopening other areas of life while not seeing the virus take off. There are still lots of people vulnerable to harm. That's why we need to carry on at the quickest pace possible with our vaccination programme. And all of us need to stick with it. We have a shorter road ahead of us, but the road ahead is in terms of months. Stick with it and we can all recover together much more of our normal lives.
You said that over the next couple of weeks you're expecting a slight reduction in the quantity of vaccines received from the UK government. What planning have you put in place to prevent that being an issue?
Well, we're having to manage then the range of areas that we're delivering our vaccine from. So that means we're going to see some reduced levels of delivery. We're also, of course, having to manage the reality we're starting to do more and more second doses as well. So the way in which we use a Pfizer vaccine has to balance both the second doses that are required, as well as getting to more people in first doses. And as we've shown earlier in the vaccination programme, if we do have a quieter period of a couple of weeks, we can then pick up very quickly when we expect to have significantly increased volumes through March as well. We then expect to bring on board more of our colleagues in community pharmacy to help deliver a significant chunk of the programme too. So we're already planning for not just the next 2 weeks, but the weeks that come after that, and again, much bigger volumes of delivery that you can expect here in Wales.
Well, Gething, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, a new study says the UK's vaccination programme is already reducing the number of daily deaths. But it says as the rollout continues, it may be the time to target high-risk key workers rather than simply going downwards through the age groups. Well, the study is in the Journal of the Association of Anaesthetists, and the co-author, Dr. Tim Cook, is a consultant anaesthesia and intensive care medicine. He works there and joins me now. Good morning to you. I know that you've just come off shift. You've done an overnight shift. You can't speak about the specifics at your hospital, but how was it through the night for you?
Sorry, I try to find a quiet place around the hospital. This may not be the quiet place. Busy. Had a couple of hours sleep. Intensive cares across the country are extremely busy and will remain so for some time to come.
And what are the pressures that ICUs are working under?
Well, we have about the equivalent of an extra 150 intensive cares open compared to our normal. So the normal in the UK is that we have about 200 intensive cares. And the degree of expansion that has happened to cope with this second surge is the equivalent of opening approximately somewhere between another 150 and 200 intensive cares. So although not all those intensive cares are full, there are effectively twice as many beds, staffed by the same number of full-time intensive care nurses and doctors, supported by many other clinicians. And as I say, this is not going to turn around very quickly.
What have you found through your study?
So it's a modelling study. So like all models, it makes assumptions. We hope the assumptions are valid and we hope that the findings are useful. What we found is that, as is already known, that the vaccines will have a reasonably rapid impact on mortality. So that we will see deaths from COVID falling. We're probably seeing it already. So at the moment, we're seeing a combination of a reduction in deaths from both from lockdown, but also from the impact of vaccines, which takes about 5 weeks to come through. But because the patients who are in hospital are about 10 years younger on average than the patients who die, and the patients in intensive care are another 10 or 12 years younger than the average patient admitted to hospital, the impact on admissions to both those places is delayed. And so probably it will take another month or 5 weeks for the impact of the vaccination to have a significant impact on those measures. So what I mean by that is that while mortality, if everything goes very well, this is a best case scenario, mortality from COVID will reduce by more than 80% by the end of March. It will take at least another month for us to see the impact on hospital admissions and ITU admissions, which emphasises the importance of ongoing vaccination and really vaccinating quite deep into the population.
So you're talking about the 1 to 4, that first cohort being vaccinated. If you then add on the other levels, 5 to 7, then what does that do to the figure?
Yeah, so 1 to 4 is patients over 70 and frontline healthcare and social care workers, which we're approaching this week. And that reduces mortality by almost 80% when the effects are seen, as I say, which will be in several weeks. But it only reduces ITU admissions by about 30%. And it's going to take, as you say, vaccinating into along to group 7, which is all patients over 60 and the extremely clinically vulnerable and high risk, to reduce hospital admissions and mortality, hospital admissions and ITU down to figures around beyond 60%.
What are the schools of thought of how to proceed after the 1 to 7 category, after that's been achieved, what's the roadmap from there on in?
So it's extraordinarily noisy here. The options are not mine, of course. What our modelling shows that once you've vaccinated more than 50% of the adult population, then the impact on deaths, hospital admissions and IT admissions tends to flatten off. And at that point, there is perhaps a decision to be made. Should the vaccination programme reconsider? Should it focus on younger people to reduce transmission, on key workers, or perhaps even there's the global perspective. Should some of the UK vaccine be redirected to countries who have less access, as global vaccination is an essential part of what we do, and it's in our self-interest to ensure that vaccines reach countries beyond our shores.
Tim Cook, thanks for finding the quietest wall that you could. Go off and have some sleep now. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. As senior Democrats close their case against Donald Trump in his historic second impeachment trial, we'll take a closer look at whether he'll actually be convicted.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
The wind was like pulling us out of that little room.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
I'm Greg Milam, Sky's US correspondent here in Los Angeles. It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal. You trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
I've seen the dark side of America. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've seen heartbreaking human stories.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here. Now, it's been compelling viewing watching the impeachment trial against Donald Trump, seeing again the shocking scenes as his supporters burst into the Capitol, the seat of the US Congress. But it seemed more likely that Mr. Trump will be impeached. Joining me now is Bernadette Myler, Professor of Law at Stanford and an expert in American constitutional law. Welcome to you. As I was saying there, those pictures released for the first time, quite shocking. Will they have any bearing on the impeachment trial, though?
I think that senators across the aisle have been impressed by the images. Republicans have acknowledged being moved by the Democrats' case, but I think not enough to ensure conviction of Donald Trump. There are a couple obstacles, I think, standing in the way of Republicans going all the way in favor of impeachment.
How strong is the argument that Donald Trump actually incited violence?
I think from a criminal perspective, incitement is an extremely high bar because the U.S. is kind of exceptional in how it treats free speech under the First Amendment. There's a requirement for criminal prosecutions that incitement really be intended to produce an immediate and violent effect. Now, I think that what Trump did meets that bar, but it doesn't need to meet that bar for impeachment proceedings because impeachment proceedings have always had a different standard than criminal trials. The Senate is the sole body empowered to try impeachments, and that means that they really get to decide what the standards are procedurally and substantively. At the same time, I think a lot of senators are going to say, oh, we're not really convinced that Trump actually caused this violence. You know, he may have condoned it, but he wasn't trying to get the rioters to storm the Capitol and invade the Senate proceedings.
What the Democrats are trying to show is a pattern of behaviour on Donald Trump's part, and the fact that he showed no remorse and appealing for a bipartisan approach. But you don't think that that's going to happen? You think that will fall on deaf ears?
I think that will fall on deaf ears and that other senators will decide that because he's no longer president, that there's not really a constitutional power to impeach him. Yeah.
If he isn't impeached, what bearing does that have on whether he'll be able to run for public office again? That's a separate process, isn't it?
Exactly. So the problem I think that Democrats see is that if he's not impeached, that will mean that he can still be eligible to run for public office. If he were impeached, then they could just take a majority vote to disqualify him from future public office. Without the impeachment conviction, that's going to be a lot more difficult. Now, there is another possibility that Democrats could contemplate, and that comes from the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which was ratified after the U.S. Civil War and was intended in part to bar people who had fought for the Confederacy from holding future office. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that anyone who is involved in insurrection against the United States or who gives comfort to the enemies of the United States is barred from federal office. So that could be decided by a vote of Congress, and that's another potential way that Trump could be barred from office.
The consensus is that he will be acquitted. Do you agree with that?
I don't think so. I think he should be convicted, but I also thought he should be convicted the first time around. And I just think that the bar for impeachment is so high that you have to have a 2/3 vote of the Senate. There's almost nothing that 2/3 of senators will agree on. So, I think it's just implausible politically that it would happen. But I don't agree with the outcome.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us this morning, Bernadette Myler. Thank you. Now, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been giving his reaction to the latest GDP figures, which came out a few moments ago.
And today's figures show that last year our economy experienced a significant shock. And whilst there were some signs of resilience over winter, what's clear is right now many families and businesses are experiencing hardship. That's why we've put in place a comprehensive plan for jobs to support people through this crisis, and we will set out the next stage of our economic response at our budget in early March.
And we'll be hearing more from the Chancellor in the next hour. Time now for the weather, though. Naz?
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. It is going to be cold for the next few days, but into the new week, we'll eventually start to see milder conditions. But until then, yes, cold, chilly this morning. In fact, again, it is very cold with temperatures below freezing overnight for most places. Into minus double figures across parts of Scotland, but not as low as they were yesterday. So it's a less cold morning. Frosty, there is a risk of ice as well across the north and east, where there are some snow showers there. And over southwestern areas, it's windy. There's some patchy outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow across parts of Ireland and the southwest of the UK. And there is also the risk of ice there too. Now, through the day, we will see that rain, sleet and snow tend to ease. So I think it will become dry across these parts, but it will stay quite cloudy for parts of the west. Windy as well, with coastal gales likely. Not as windy further east, but it's going to be mainly dry and bright, but with snow showers in the northeast.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.